virtual production, I feel it's an age-old chestnut, and we haven't really got into it yet, but everyone's been talking about it. Strangely, we've learned today at the INC show that a lot of higher education and education institutions in the US are very quietly spending an awful lot of money on virtual production facilities. We don't know quite what they are, what they're being used for, and why they felt under pressure to do it. But I think they're thinking of remote learning and various other things that perhaps would benefit from a slightly different environment to demonstrate and imbue a sense of interaction with their students remotely. Now in the UK, I don't know too much, I have to look into it, but people think of Hollywood and the big films, but we're trying to, relate virtual production to the AV industry and where it feels it can attach itself to it, and where we can, really capitalise on the facilities and the opportunities it gives. Certainly a new generation almost as well of talented potential people who can create amazing experiences through it. But we're not quite sure how it's going to manifest itself to the general AV public at large. Now, you've had quite a few interfaces into the public, haven't you? You've been selling various bits of stuff to people in whatever technology. What technologies are people buying, and what are they using? How do they put them all together? And what applications are they creating? Have we got that far yet, or are they just testing it out?
I mean, the technology is being used in earnest, a lot.
LED screens.
Yeah, I mean, LED screens have been around for many years. I mean, Brompton started in sort of in the live events industry, and then has moved into virtual production and LED on camera over the past sort of 2.5 years. But we were always because we were using like large scale events that already had LED on camera. So we're in a good position when virtual production started to kick off, because we'd already put a lot of focus into sort of LED on camera, and then so for the last 2.5 years, you say it's felt like virtual production has been around for a long time. I think that's probably because it's been around the whole pandemic, and the pandemic's felt like it's been around for a very long time.
Covering with the Lord of the Rings, that people thought we were crazy. What on earth were we doing? And mentioned things like 60 frames per second and everything else. What relevance would it be? A week later, we had all the production manufacturers on the line saying, well, we'd like to be part of this feature. We'll be able to do this, and this. And they put a bit of meat on the bone. And you see one opposite side of it. You've seen the BBC's studio for the Olympics and the Winter Games on one side, which is a conventional environment, and executed brilliantly with Vizart, and that is an absolute shoe-in for something like virtual production environment. But on the other side, we've got the location-based experiences where you've got a small installation in a museum or somewhere else that could probably benefit from a bit of pizzazz and a new way of presenting what to some people might think is dead information. It animates it, brings it to life, and adds a different dimension to make it come alive and help a bit different interpretation of what's going on. And it's the slightly smaller scale or large scale. I mean, live events, big scale, major impression, a lot of money being spent on making live events the real wow type of experience on there. They're leading everybody at the minute as far as I can see. But it's which part of that cherry are we going to see slightly more of?
I mean, I don't think we're never going to go back to how things were 100% pre-pandemic. So over the pandemic, there was all this need for sort of XR, like corporate people wanted to have these like online experiences, so they could talk to their employees or do their marketing or whatever. And I think that's not going to go away. I think they saw these ways of communicating with people, and I think they're going to stay. So I think we're going to see more like these studios that they're still being built, the XR and the VP things. So these sort of these smaller institutions, like say museums and stuff, are starting to see the benefits of being able to have this sort of like the Olympics. You get the wow factor of the sort of the XR, the extended set, and things, and suddenly they can present information on in a brand new way. And I don't think just because in-person events and all those things are coming back, I don't think those sort of XR online things are going to go away anytime soon. And in terms of like virtual production, I know that a lot of focus gets put on like sort of the Mandalorian and those like big massive sets, but virtual production and like LED on camera can be used in a much more hidden way. Like you could have a set of a flat, and outside the window there's a bit of LED doing the backdrop, or you're filming a train and you've got just the LED is doing like just plates at the back. So it's not, you don't even need the whole virtual production set up with the tracking systems and everything like that. You could just be filming on a pre-filmed backdrop of plates, and then when you've finished filming your train going down the track, you can just, rather than on set where you have to reverse the train back up to shoot it again, you can just rewind your footage and play it back. So it doesn't always need to be those huge applications. There's massive, Guinness World Record breaking sized sets. It can be much smaller scale. So that's where sort of like smaller film sets and smaller film studios can also get on board with this stuff without having to completely break the bank, I guess.
It's managing the combination of equipment you've got. I mean, I can see lots of things in screen development that perhaps might change to accommodate new uses for them, and might transform LED screens into something entirely different. Who knows? Yeah,
LED screens are, because of this has taken off. We've gone from like sort of the standard pitch of like the distance between your pixels going from like 5 millimeters to like all the way down to like 0.6 in a matter of a few years. And before to get from like the very coarse pitch, the ones we had a few years ago, was quite a slow development, and now it's going so much faster because everyone's trying to get into the game. And the amount of like LED you see around here, the amount of LEDs like on camera applications you're seeing around here is just multiplying the whole time. So, and that's pushing the industry forward at a much faster pace than it was previously, and that's being driven by just the popularity of this way of working.
The new element to these software gaming engines that are coming in, I mean, getting the right software and getting to the right thing and programming right must be quite an art, I've thought.
Yeah, I mean, it does move the virtual production. It doesn't get rid of, you're shooting and you can see your content live on the screen. That's great for directors. Directors are they love the fact that you can shoot and see what your final product's going to look like, and the actors can act against it. But it doesn't get rid of, it's just moving all your post-production to pre-production. Essentially, you're just moving all that visual work before to before. So it's just and I think it's getting people used to that way of working. And so the way that the way the game engines come in there, if you've got sort of a tracked camera system that can pick up where the camera is in the space, as that moves around, the perspective on the LED can move around, and that's all handled like within the game engine, and then where our processor will then take that feed and put it out to the LED, and then you can get and then you can shoot you can use 2 or 3, 4 cameras at once, and then have each perspective on the camera. Each camera only see its perspective on the LED, so you can shoot with multiple cameras at once. So the innovation is happening very, very fast. And everyone's trying to think of the best practice, because everyone is new to this. Everyone's coming in quite fresh and learning on the job. So I don't think there's any sort of like best practice really at the moment. Everyone's doing it the way they want to do it. And what we're trying to do is constantly trying to innovate and make it as easy as possible for customers to be able to pick up the processor and get the LED looking exactly how they want it to look, and use it. Yeah.
And what do you call that service you provide? Is it
So the multi-camera thing is called it's a frame remapping. That's what we call it, and it's the ability to on the LED. So we're showing it here, and on the LED, if you're running fast enough, it means that to the eye it just looks like 2 images superimposed, but it's actually one image and then the second image like sequentially, but displayed very fast, and then you can use the shutter. You can, on the camera shutter, as long as the camera is exposing the exact same time as the LED is refreshing, the camera will just capture the frame that's right for its perspective.
Now, who typically is operating this gear?
Well,
in-house, or is it a consultancy service you offer?
So we don't. We're just the manufacturer. We don't.
I'm seeing that changing potentially.
Yeah.
It's a nice lucrative string in your bow.
We do offer training, but we're not going onto film sets and sitting there and operating on the day. There'll be because we're doing the processing, but all the sort of the heavy handling of the content is happening inside like an Unreal.
No, indeed.
In a disguised server.
But
So there'll be operators who can do that sort of thing. And
yes, but it's a question of who. That's the thing.
Yes.
If someone you obviously with the existing broadcast setup in a large corporate, say a bank, for example, is looking to produce something, you have some existing skill, but no one presumably capable, people potentially capable, but having any experience whatsoever in this sort of thing, that they could easily bring in and be quite clever with. But that's not going to be an in-house skill initially. So it's a question of we're trying to encapsulate all this. So right, this is what's potentially possible. These are the things you need to bear in mind. These are the skills you need. This is where you might want to develop certain staff to acquire them.
Well, yeah, there definitely are like a skills gap, and I think there is a limitation in the amount of people who are out there and can do these works. And you were talking earlier about universities building these walls, and I think that's very much needed because we need more people, young people with these skills coming through who can do all these things.
What about cost? Is that something people should be frightened of, or just embrace?
I mean, the big walls aren't. They're not cheap.
All within reason. I don't mean the big mega things cost millions, don't they? Well,
yes.
We're not talking about that sort of league.
Well, I mean, you probably could fit up a smaller studio on it wouldn't, not a meager budget, but I don't know if I'm going to give an exact number here.
I mean, more people are doing the studio approach and everything else, but now they're thinking of more multi-user spaces. So what would have passed as a studio in the relatively recent old days could well be a similar sort of experience area into which you would have a studio element and a demonstration element and an immersive environment, say 3 elements of that one space to be used, but thinking of an infrastructure that could support the different technologies you want to put in there takes some planning. And at the moment, quite a lot of people are doing these digital infrastructure projects that are taking into account environments in the office they want to create different functions and features and support mechanisms to, but in order to enable that, I mean, for example, look at AVI-SPL, major international integrated, very traditional operating symphony to manage something for global global companies. Now taking over XTG, an experience centre. Now it's calling itself an experience solutions provider. Now you'd never put the two together at one time, would you? But it's a hugely potentially lucrative opportunity, but it's not quite the simple sell. So you've got to come to there who's understanding what the business needs and actually using a different perspective on technology to rethink spaces. So you're not looking at workspace anymore, you're looking at collaboration or whatever, as a service. So then you start to think, well, we're looking after your infrastructure and develop it for you, consulting on it for you, depending on what you want to do as a business or wherever you would, like higher education or whatever it may actually. So then you're starting to think and taking that bigger, more strategic picture view, that it's just not a one-off little technology that you want to pop in or have an external event as people used to in the old days. It's a different mindset coming about, I suspect.
I think universities probably are seeing higher education. You said it's going into a lot of places in America. I'm sure outside of education they are using that for commercial shoots. They can use that for for online events, and I'm sure these sort of spaces will turn into multifaceted. There's places in England that are doing, if they'll do film shoots on their walls and say someday, or TV shoots, but they'll also be doing commercials. They'll also have inviting students in to learn. I mean, once you put the investment in these massive projects, you want to use them as for everything you can.
It's a question of how much interoperability there needs to be, isn't it, with what used to be almost like an element of the live events industry and broadcast, which is sort of, you're seeing it, certain industries you never thought would overlap in a sense, even though they're outside, very different requirements, certainly not corporate. The mindset's so different, where these are all big problem solvers doing live things that need to be done there and then. Great network engineers don't faff about with the support that you need in a corporate environment. They're not IT people, certainly not. So you've seen these different worlds start to overlap, but the problem is the technology is quite bespoke for each one.
Well, a lot of people who had, over the pandemic, I know a lot of rental houses who had a lot of LED for live events and stuff started renting that stuff out for these sort of big virtual production volumes and stuff.
My
Because
next question.
Yeah.
It's going to be given the boost to the rental market, isn't it?
yeah, because not everyone has the finance or wants to spend the money on building these things. So when you can pay a rental company, they can come up and they set it all up for you and run it for you. So I think these companies are seeing these companies are doing quite well because they've over the pandemic they've introduced this new facet to their business that isn't going away, and then now as the live events comes back, they're now we're seeing people buy stock to refill up their live events rental stock because all their previous stock is now on film shoots and stuff. So there definitely is overlap there, as long as you've got because the live events pixel pitch is generally a bit bigger. You might have like a 5mm product, which you could use for a ceiling in a virtual production studio, but you probably wouldn't use for like your main wall. But as long as if you've got something that's around sort of 2.8 to that sort of pixel pitch that you might have used on live events, that can be repurposed for on-camera virtual production workflows. Yeah.
How do you plan ahead when you're looking at, say, what manufacturing potential will we need to develop and plan for as we go forward? How do you keep an eye on that? How do you plan? It must be very difficult when things are changing so quickly. And
yeah, they are.
potential opportunities come from nowhere, don't they?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, I think over the pandemic, a lot of our features have been quite reactive to the virtual production thing. The framing mapping thing, as I was talking about, we've introduced a thing called shutter sync, where you can input your camera's settings into the processor, and then the LED will make sure it refreshes at the exact same time as your camera. So that feature was an exact reaction to what people were asking for on film sets. And the tracking markers that the camera tracks off, we can now put those on the LED, and that again is a direct reaction to what was going on in the industry at the time, what people were asking for. In terms of like hardware development, I probably can't comment much on that. I'm not involved in that side at all. And in terms of features, we're always talking to people. We're always talking to the film studios who want, and if they want features and stuff, we'll talk to our developers and try and get them in and try and keep everyone happy. But yeah, I think you're right. It's probably at the moment like for sort of the. It's reactive to the industry, a lot of the stuff that we do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Patrick.
Cool, no problem at all.